Welcome to the UCLA Anderson Drive Time Podcast. My name is Dylan Stafford. I am your host. This month, we are honoring Women's History Month, and we have a very special edition. I'm going to be with you for just a couple minutes here at the beginning, and then I'm going to fade into the background, and the wonderful people you see on the screen today are going to guide you through a first-person narrative of what is it like to invest in yourself with a graduate degree, an MBA in particular at UCLA, and real lessons from the real court of life. What's it like to be a modern woman making your way forward? We're going to share some incredible best practices. And I just want to acknowledge my team, Samantha, Hollon, and Darcy, Hitt. We've been working together for a year. It's March 2021. We started this adventure at the onset of COVID last year. We've put together a catalog of about 15 wonderful episodes. And in January, when we were mapping out this year, our committee, our team, led by Samantha and Darcy, really had the idea of, wow, we could honor Black History Month based on what we learned from honoring Veterans Day last fall. So we loved that episode, and following in that, today is really a community conversation honoring Women's History Month. Mm-hmm. So we're just excited about this. Let me just tell you some of the people that you're going to get to meet today. So we have 2 alum from 2015, and then 3 of us are from just last year, the class of 2020. Kathi Chandler-Payatt is a vice president of content analytics and strategy at MGM. She's in the lower left on my screen. So welcome, Kathi. We're thrilled you're here.
Thank you. Thanks.
And one of her classmates. So we have 2 members of the class of 2015 to kind of give you that first stair step after point of view. So Ramine, Cromartie is in a brand new job since January, so 3 months in. A manager of the Southern California region of the Western States Petroleum Association. Welcome, Ramine.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, it's great to have you. And then a face that may be a little familiar to you all because she was one of our summer spotlight series, nominated by her classmates last summer. Dr. Dominique, Kagele, class of 2020, who is also in a almost new role as a senior manager of global product strategy at Genentech. Hi, welcome back, Dominique.
Hi, thanks so much for having me again. It's been a pleasure.
We are happy to get to catch up and see what's happening since 6 months ago. And then let me just take a final moment. Samantha Hollon, brand new job, Director of Customer Experience at Glider, and has been really all of last year's videos were edited with meticulous care, love, and appreciation by Samantha. And I have a joke on the team. It's called PSR, PSDR, which is the post-Samantha Darcy reality that I'm being forced to envision as you all move on to bigger and better things. And then lastly, Darcy Hitt, classmate with Dominique and Samantha, who has really been our content strategist, our marketing consultant, and co-executive producer of Drive Time this year. And she's got, I'm a short timer with Darcy's talents also. So, all of us together here, thank you for, sharing your stories, being willing to talk about yourself in public, recorded, because the lane that we try to occupy with Drive Time is the build your own adventure that a modern career is, and how the investment in oneself of graduate school and MBA in particular can be something that people choose to do as they build their own adventure, and the sharing success and the places you'll go. That UCLA Anderson is a magnet for the young, globally talented people from around the world. We have 125 opportunities to earn a graduate degree, and we're talking about one. We're talking about the MBA. And everyone on the screen here earned that while they maintained full employment. Some of you have families. A very courageous thing to do in the middle of your career, to not quit, but keep working and carve out 20 hours a week for 2 or 3 years with some of the best faculty in the world and some of the most wonderful peers in the world. And everybody that you're going to hear from today did that. So so that's what we're going to talk about. And Darcy and Sam have built out the agenda. So we're going to do our normal why UCLA, why MBA, but that's going to be a shortened piece, because really the focus, what is it to be a modern woman? So some of the topics that are going to get covered: negotiating. How do you do that? How do you do that with confidence? How do you do that well? How do you be assertive in the workplace? What do you do when imposter syndrome kicks in? Where does mentorship, how do we pay it forward? How do we have a hand up pulling us forward? How do we have a hand back for the next generation? We've got a little time travel. We're going to look ahead to 2015. And we're going to look back to the past. So this is a very creative episode. And that's about all that you're going to hear from me today as I fade to black, and let the ladies take it from here. So I'm going to hide self-view and enjoy listening in the background along with our audience. Thank you all.
Thanks, Dylan.
Thank you so much, Dylan. And I want to reiterate to our esteemed panel, thank you so much for giving us your time today. And to kick us off, I'm going to start by sharing about my MBA journey and what brought me to Anderson. So again, I am Darcy Hitt, and I am a recent graduate from the FEMBA class of 2020. Tell you a little bit about my long road to Anderson. Growing up, you can see here, I moved all over the country multiple times over. North Dakota to Illinois, back to North Dakota, to Alaska, to Colorado, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Utah, back to Colorado again. And then I was in Colorado when I first started the MBA program. About a year into the program, I finally made the move out to California. So you'll see that's where I am currently at. A little bit about my education and professional background. I graduated from the University of Utah with a double major in psychology and exercise science or kinesiology. While I was there, I was very active in my sorority, which was Delta Delta Delta. The picture I have here is of our bid day when we open our bids and we get to see which house that we're going to be rushing for. That was definitely a memorable day for me. A couple of other things I was involved in were Golden Key, which is an international honor society that recognizes academic achievement. And perhaps one of the most interesting things that I did during my undergrad year was in my final year, I worked with a doctoral student on her dissertation research. And she was looking at how prison inmates adjusted to prison life, were their personality styles that led them to, quote unquote, adjust better. So as a research assistant, I worked with her, and I went into the prisons and interviewed the inmates and administered personality tests to them, as well as conducting file reviews to gather some background information on them. At one point, I thought I was going to pursue forensic psychology, which is why I chose to work with that doctoral student, but I have obviously chosen a different path. So professionally, I've kind of been in multiple different industries. I spent a couple years in education working for Kaplan Test Prep, and several years in law, as well as a paralegal. That was another path I had considered. But ultimately, looking at the long-term career trajectory, I thought going to business school would do more for me and kind of open up more opportunities. So when looking at my next job opportunity, I chose to work for a nonprofit, and specifically in their consulting arm. And we worked primarily with government or justice system partners. And so that kind of takes me up through my MBA journey and what led me to Anderson. I am definitely a career switcher. And I would say my FEMBA journey involves kind of the three pillars: academics, professional, and social. On the left-hand side here, you'll see the academic pieces, where I really wanted to make a pivot into entertainment marketing. And marketing specifically, I wanted to better understand consumer behavior. And in terms of entertainment, some of you may have heard this story before, but when I was growing up in Alaska, I'll never forget when my dad decided to install one of the first satellite dishes ever made. It was before DirecTV, before Dish. It was 15 feet wide. It was massive. And I didn't realize it at the time, but had he not done so, we really wouldn't have had access to even, basic news programming. So for me, that really opened up a whole other world, getting access. And so that's really where my interest and love for entertainment started, which only continued to grow. So a couple of the pictures here. On the right-hand side, that was part of my Global Access Program, or GAP, capstone project. We worked with a Swedish company to evaluate go-to-market strategy here in the US, whether they should be bringing their business to the US. And the person in the picture, he is a very well-known, world-renowned Olympic cross-country skier. And so we got to meet him as part of our trip to Sweden. And then on the left-hand side is a picture of me with some classmates in India. I got to go on the global immersion to both Mumbai and Hyderabad. There we're at the gate of India, and part of that focus was on entertainment, which is why I wanted to specifically take advantage of that opportunity. Then the second pillar for me was kind of progressing professionally. And while I was in school, I decided to join FEMBA Council. My second year, I served as an internal representative, kind of overseeing academics and logistics for my section. And then my final year, I ran for a position on the executive board, and I was able to oversee all academic and student services for the entire FEMBA student body. And that was a really, really memorable and formative part of my FEMBA journey. It gave me a chance to kind of take on a leadership role. And so that picture on the right-hand side is the full executive board about a month after we'd all been voted in, right before we were getting ready to go to the end of the year party, which is the spring quarter's kind of major event for FEMBA. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see I had an opportunity to go with the executive education program to CBS Studios, where we got to go to the set of Entertainment Tonight and meet Nancy O'Dell. So that was a really fun experience. And then the last piece here is I secured an internship with Rights Trade to learn more about content licensing. And so I spent about 6 months with them to gain some industry experience around entertainment. And of course, the piece that everyone is probably most interested in is the social aspect. So you'll see here, I have multiple pictures. The one on the upper left here is our first casino night, our first year. And then in the upper right is our Halloween party. This was my final year. You'll probably recognize some of the faces from the middle picture. It is the executive board again from the council. And the bottom right is a couple of my classmates and myself. It was our first FEMBA Vegas trip, our first year. We were on our way from dinner to go see a show. And then the bottom left was UCLA night at the Dodgers. So that kind of takes me through my FEMBA journey up until about a year ago when I graduated in June, which takes me to today. What's next for me? As I like to say, the rest is still unwritten. You may recognize that lyric in a song. It's also part of the song theme show, one of my favorite shows. During this time, I've been able to work with Dylan as a marketing consultant and content strategist here on the Drive Time podcast, which I've been so grateful to do during this time. And besides that, I am looking for that next opportunity, and hopefully that will come in the entertainment industry in the months to come. So it's a little bit about me, and I will turn it over to Kathi to share a little bit about her background and her experience.
So my name again is Kathi Chandler-Payatt. I am from the class of 2015, and I'm going to take you through my journey. I used to be a consultant, so of course we have to do a flow chart. So I'm not going to start in college and my entire background. I'm going to start right before Anderson, where I was working at a small boutique consulting firm, and there really wasn't a growth opportunity in that firm. Like I'd gone up to be an associate. I tried to learn as much as I could, and I felt really stagnated. I didn't really know where to go. So I was trying to see if I could self-teach and evaluate whether I needed an MBA, because frankly, the cost is pretty intense, and I didn't have a company that was going to help me. So I started, deeply researching it, and spent the first year between 2010 and 2011 in GMAT hell. And that's because I didn't realize that I had test-taking anxiety. And when you have that, I thought that affected other people. That didn't affect me. And when you have that, what happens is you freeze. So you become about 50% less smart than you normally are in that situation. And so the way that you would take a test normally, where you perform really well, you perform, at a big chunk down of your level. And that was really hard for me to understand, and a big kind of confidence blow, right? But if that is you, right, if that is somebody listening to this, like I learned that did not, I did okay. And I made sure my application was strong in as many other ways as I could, but that will not stop you. It didn't stop me. And I got into Anderson in mid-2012 was when I started there. And I made a commitment to myself to do things that I was not comfortable doing. And the first thing I started doing was I ran to be the internal rep on FEMBA Council during Leadership Foundation. So I've met everyone in my class for about 4 days, and I've asked them to vote for me in my section to do this FEMBA Council role, and I got it. And I'd never had that kind of responsibility. It felt very uncomfortable, but it also felt exciting because that was why I'm here. I left my job at the consulting firm. I got an internship at a startup, and I wanted to learn more about tech and product. And I was going to basically use this journey to explore, like I really loved entertainment. I even liked consulting, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't like other things too. So I wanted to try other areas. So I got this internship at a startup. I realized I didn't want to work at a startup. I ended up using my studies in statistics, like statistics from Anderson. Like I started classes, and I learned enough to, apply and get some freelance consulting jobs, like using that. And I would go to the Career Center and try to get their help about how to leverage even just being in school. That meant a lot to me. They said, well, you can leverage even before you get your full degree. Just being in school is a selling point. And I was like, well, if that's true, I'm gonna do that. And so that would be part of the way I would interview. I'd say, I don't have my full degree yet, but you're getting a lot of this information for free. So, you got what I've learned so far for free. I'm bringing that to the table. And I ended up transitioning to a consulting role at Toyota, where I learned about behavioral data. And that basically means something like, we can see that Kathi lives in Los Angeles, Kathi owns a dog, and Kathi likes yoga, right? And so we want to serve Kathi a certain kind of ad. I also did the Hong Kong immersion, where I learned, it was the first time I'd gone to Asia, learning about doing business in Asia and Asian culture. Traveling with my classmates was one of the best things. Honestly, I love travel, but traveling with my classmates is the most fun experience. If I could recreate it, I would. And that year, when we did GAP, I applied to be a GAP fellow. I was also out of my comfort zone. Even reaching for that, I was afraid of honestly getting rejected. And I did get the GAP fellowship. And then the year that I graduated, there was, essentially a farewell trip of this Japan immersion class. And it meant a lot to me because I was in section 2, which is a section on Saturdays, but a lot of the people in my section went on that trip. So we all kind of closed out our Anderson journey together in Tokyo, and that meant so much. So I ended up graduating, which is, that's important, I guess, to point out that, it seems assumed, but yeah, I did. And I I got a job. I got my first offer at a studio at Fox, and I really leveraged the Anderson network to get that job because I hadn't been working in entertainment. So I reached out, honestly, I reached out to people I didn't know on LinkedIn that went to Anderson and worked in entertainment. And I said, I have an interview coming. Would you just please talk to me for 20 minutes and tell me about what's happening in the interview, in the industry, so that I can try to sound a little current and up to date. And almost every single person wrote me back and gave me time. And I couldn't believe that they did that. I closed out that year, like I was a student earlier in the year, and later in the year, I was asked to be a GAP judge, which also felt kind of crazy because I just graduated. It felt like this huge accomplishment to be, and an honor to be asked. So I would like to point out, I wouldn't have gotten my Fox job as well. They did want someone with an MBA. And so that was really an asset in getting that job. I continued on at Fox and I loved it. I was promoted to executive director. And then unfortunately, the Disney Fox acquisition was announced in 2017. And I left in 2018 because I wanted to get a job I liked and not go through sort of the severance situation that they were going to do. And then last year, I celebrated my 5-year GAP fellowship. I still volunteer every year. I learn something every single time working with the team. So I like staying involved in the school. And this last year, I got my first executive offer at MGM, where I'm now the vice president of content analytics and strategy. I also love my job right now. I was asked as well to teach a seminar for the Anderson business analytics course. So I felt really honored about that. Like I'm on the other side of the podium. I'm used to being the student. And I also celebrate my 5th year as a judge. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey. Like just from the time I got into Anderson over the last 8 years, I feel like it's helped me accomplish a great deal. So let me turn it over to Dominique to take you through her journey.
Yeah, so I will keep mine a little bit shorter just because I've had the honor of talking with Dylan and Sam and Darcy for the Drive Time podcast last year. So it's just such an honor to be here with Kathi and Sam and Ramine and Darcy, just talking about women's issues and what it's like to really transition from being an Anderson student to, an Anderson alum, and really bringing everything that we've learned in that environment to our current lives as women. So let me move to the next slide if I can. I only have one slide and really I just wanted to kind of highlight all of the women during my Anderson or FEMBA journey. Just before I kind of do that really quickly, my background is that I'm a scientist by training. I got my PhD all the way the heck back in 2010. I was a scientist and a bench scientist for 7 years, and then moved into industry because I really wanted to have the work that I do have a direct impact on patient health. So so essentially now I work in pharmaceuticals, and I decided to go and pursue my MBA really as a way to get a better business understanding. As a scientist, I really didn't have any business training. And I thought in order for me to maximize my impact in a pharmaceutical organization, essentially a corporate organization, I really needed to have those fundamentals. So, which led me to Anderson. But yeah, again, I just wanted to, since it is Women's History Month, really highlight the numerous women that were in the class and who really were instrumental in my success as a student. These are only just a handful of people, but anyhow, these were the pictures that would all fit onto one slide, because I could, post 100 different slides. That's how many women have truly impacted me. But this here is myself and Christina, who I met during Leadership Foundations, and she's just a great friend of mine. Adi and me, this is Adi, Aditi and me at our GAP, a party after our GAP presentations. And so you can see that we are extremely excited to be done, because we are now master's candidates. Farrell and myself, I'm giving her a big wet one on the right. And she was one of the people that was a part of my original Leadership Foundations group, and she and I remain close. On the bottom is Megan and myself, and then actually one of my coworkers in New York City. That's one thing I'll actually say, is that a lot of these relationships, these friendships, span all across, not only in LA, but all over the country and all over the world. And so here on the bottom left, we're in New York City. If we move over to the right, here's a Halloween party. And we can see so many beautiful women that are adorned in our red lipstick, in our power color. But again, just having fun. And then here's Annika and myself, and she's been such a support of mine, just being somebody who listens, and we all need that, somebody who understands the journey but also is just incredibly supportive. She's so nurturing. And then finally on the bottom are Tharal and Maddie and myself in Belize. And so that's one of the trips that we took as FEMA students. And this actually was not a part of any of the immersions. This was one that we did ourselves. And again, I just wanted to highlight all of or I shouldn't say all, but some of the women who have really made an impact in my life during my Anderson journey, during and after. And something that I said with Dylan on my first podcast is that, I went to business school not only to get the business training and to get the degree, but also really to gain a lot of friendships, as well as just the expertise and the knowledge that you get when you have people from such diverse backgrounds in different industries. And so that has certainly been one of the biggest payoffs and return on investment for me. From my MBA from Anderson, are just the numerous friendships and this, like I said, incredible support network that I have. So I will stop sharing and I will hand it off to Ramine.
Hello, thank you, Dominique. And it's pretty exciting to see all your stories. I know we've talked a bit about your background, but to see it is another thing. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. But before I do, just want to remind everyone, my name is Ramine Cromartie. I am FEMBA class of 2015, so along with Kathi. So my journey to Anderson, I will start in my college years. So I went to Stanford University and majored in chemical engineering. And this picture on the upper left is a photo of my mom and my grandmother. In honor of Women's History Month, I wanted to highlight very powerful, impactful female relationships that have been a part of my life and brought me to where I am. That's us at graduation. At my time at Stanford, I did a lot of different activities, but the core were around rugby. That's that center picture right here. This is a picture of one of the teams that we had formed. I was on the rugby team for 2 years, and we participated in the national championship for those 2 years and won my junior year. So that was a pretty special occasion for all of us. And you talk about amazing, talented women that go on to do great things. They want to be teachers, astronauts, surgeons, and just great people all around. So I've learned a lot from spending quality time with them. In the bottom right are two organizations I was also a part of, NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers. And being an engineer, it was important to find that sense of community. And that just really helped me get through the tough years that were engineering, as I'm sure Dominique can attest to, going through the sciences. And this other organization is called Jam Packed. It was a hip hop dance troupe, one of the first hip hop dance troupes at Stanford. You talk about a release. I find that I am best in balance when you've got academic, spiritual, and physical activities that push you. So try to keep that in balance during my college years. Right after college, I ended up moving to Texas, hence the logo in the middle. Starting in California, moved to Texas, out to Houston. My first role was in environmental engineering, and I had an opportunity to become promoted to an environment, health, and safety manager out at a facility in Houston. But while I was there, always keeping that connection to a sense of community. I love working with kids. I love STEM outreach, STEM being science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and took every opportunity that I could to exercise and get involved in those efforts. So the journey to come to Anderson for me wasn't immediately obvious. So I was living in Texas at the time, and I knew I wanted to get an MBA, similar to a lot of you guys, with wanting to enhance or switch. For me, it was enhancing and realizing I'd reached a plateau with my current path. And so I wanted to go to business school. And the question was, do I go in Texas or do I go in California? So my family is originally from California, and a lot of other draws to get there. For me, I was talking to my dad at the time, and he had asked, when you think about your professional network, where you want to be, and California, LA, I love the community out here, and figured if I'm going to form these connections, having LA as a nucleus could be beneficial. As a lot of the women before me mentioned, it's about the network that you build, and where do you want that to be? What's the quality of those relationships? And so when you put that into the equation, it was a no-brainer. Come back and apply to Anderson. So got in successfully, pretty apparent. And while I was there, I actually ended up transitioning into a new role. I moved from environment, health, and safety into process safety, but I was also switched to becoming a consultant. So I was on the Saturday section and had to do the juggle that so many FEMBAs do of balancing work and school. And so to be quite transparent, my first 2 years, I was pretty focused on the work part of that equation. I was traveling Monday through Thursday, back in late on Saturday or Thursday night, and trying to prep and get ready for class on Saturday. So it wasn't until my third year that I made the decision to actually leave my job early and just commit to enjoying the Anderson experience. And I will caveat that by saying by that time I had secured my next role. So there was some security there. So a lot of these pictures are actually from my third year, when I was able to sort of maximize the opportunities that exist at Anderson. So in the upper left, it's a picture from a Halloween party. The bottom left is one of the hikes that I did with some classmates, some beautiful trails, as you guys all know, out in California, just beautiful scenery down here in LA. This picture in the middle is a picture of my GAP team, and you may recognize that face standing next to me. That is Kathi. I was fortunate enough to be a part of the GAP team that went overseas. So I was able to go to Italy with my other colleague there, Alex, who's standing closest to the Anderson bust. But some other iconic activities that are important activities that happened to me while I was at Anderson was getting involved in net impact. As I mentioned in the previous slide, I do have this strong desire for outreach. And so being a part of the Board Fellows program gave me the opportunity to partner with a local school and help with their marketing campaign, a good balance between my personal interests and now these new skills that I was developing. did plenty of case competitions, because what's business school without case competitions? And then the most, I'd say one of the most symbolic events for me was being a part of the team that created this event toward the back half of my spring and last term. It was a mini conference about exploring Africa as the next investment frontier. It was in partnership with the Center for Global Management, Entrepreneurs Association, as well as the African American Students in Management. And the African American Students in Management had been a while since we'd had the opportunity to do this conference. So I was really appreciative of the support that we got from all of these pillars, all of these institutions to make this happen and get that done, and brought in some amazing speakers, flew in folks from DC to talk, flew in an angel investor that has done some investing in Africa, and put an event together that really shed light on investment opportunities that we may not always be aware of, being very US centric. So after Anderson, I decided that I wanted to move back to Texas because I love that barbecue. But it was great to move back to Texas because this time I had a cohort of friends moving with me. So in this left photo, that's a picture of my fellow classmates, 2015, that all happened to move to Texas around the same time that I did. Folks were living in Dallas, Austin. I was in San Antonio, and we actually planned a road trip to I'll meet in Dallas to go to a rodeo. So I think it was like Dominique had mentioned, Anderson alums are everywhere. While the job that I had taken that brought me back to Texas was doing commercial planning and strategy for what was then Tesoro, an oil and gas company. And so essentially looking at capital projects in a 3 to 5 year timeframe and evaluating the business case for those. So I was doing that, doing some project management at the time, and it got to about the 2 or 3 year itch. You know, you graduate from business school, you take that first post business school job, and then there's that itch you get to move on because, why not keep climbing? And I found myself sort of at a fork in the road where I could continue to work in San Antonio, which was the corporate office, or move to one of the assets, the regional locations where the facilities were wanting to stay again in the energy industry. And so I got some great mentorship along the way. I had the opportunity to get some temporary assignments. And I actually spent some time in North Dakota. I think that's where you're for, Darcy, to Utah as well. And finally was able to land a permanent position at Los Angeles. So I moved out to the Los Angeles refinery and did production planning out there. Production planning is essentially looking at your sales forecast, your production forecast, and trying to align those to optimize refinery profitability. So did that. And while I was working in this new role, which was now 2 roles out of business school, realizing that there were a lot of experiences that I've had. So I'm very motivated to maybe do some aconventional type of work if it's of interest to me. So there was an opportunity to be a part of a turnaround, which is a major maintenance event for the refinery. And I raised my hand to volunteer, and I got more than I bargained for, probably. It was a 52-day turnaround, and I was working nights. So that's a photo of me at the refinery at some time in the early wee hours of the morning. Really trying to make sure that I had these rich career experiences. Meanwhile, I met a guy, and he happened to stick with me while not seeing me for some time. Figured, okay, if you made it this far, I guess you're worth putting a ring on it. So we ended up getting married. It was a COVID wedding. So that's a photo of us there. But I wanted, as I was thinking about what advice to share to the incoming class, a saying that has really motivated me, and it's the title of a book by Dr. Jeffers, is "Feel the fear and do it anyway." I think with the decision to move back to Texas, then the decision to move back to California, and then in our personal lives, we always face these sort of forks in the road, and it's okay to fear the fear, but to not let those immobilize you. So fear the failure and do it anyway is a quote that has really sort of guided me in the future. And then the bottom 2 photos, teamwork makes the dream work. apparently I say that quite a bit to the point where my coworkers, they made a cake with that slogan and made me a canteen. So I'd say that's my secondary slogan and my advice. So that's all that I wanted to share. With that, I'll pass it to Samantha.
So yeah, my name is Samantha Hollon. I am also a FEMBA 2020, and my focus, my concentration at MBA school was in entrepreneurship, and I actually kind of made a pivot from entertainment to technology during my during and / after the program. So I'll talk more about that in a bit. But just starting out, before Anderson, I did want to highlight over here that I have always been a little performer. Theater and entertainment have always been very dear and near to my heart. I went to UT Austin for undergrad. So I had a lot of that Texas pride, loved Austin. It's a great city. And really my connection with Texas, I majored in psychology and I minored in English, but I also did a special certificate program for digital art and media. And one of the great things we got to do about that is that we could spend a semester in LA doing an internship and doing a program out here. So UT kind of helped me get in to make that transition to California, and I actually ended up interning in post-production at the TV show on Sci-Fi Channel called Warehouse 13. So that was great. My boss was a UT alum, and then also a connection that we had where I would also be working and doing some internship stuff for the TV show Caprica, which was a spinoff, prequel to Battlestar Galactica, the reboot of it. So, and of course, that co-producer of post-production was also a UT alum. So it's much like Anderson, where they're everywhere. And through that, I was able to get my first job out here in LA. So I was able to stick around after my UT program had ended. And so while I was out here, I was mostly working on the creative side of the entertainment industry. I also did a really cool musical called Orange is the New Musical. It was a parody. But as a producer, this photo right here is us at a film festival. So I transitioned eventually to Universal Studios Hollywood and working in the theme park and kind of taking myself out of the performance aspect and doing more of the operations. And that's kind of where I was when I decided, I really like being a producer. I do like, working for entertainment companies, but I'm more interested in learning like the business foundations and learning how to run a company. So I was really interested in getting my business degree. And that's when I took a look at Anderson, and I really appreciated the fact that Anderson had a entertainment concentration, so many entertainment classes, the fact that, lots of people from executives to producers to all sorts of people were teaching these classes. And so I was really interested in that. But I was also interested in the tech side of things too, because, and entrepreneurship, because I felt that that's the way things were going, even in the entertainment world. So that was really one of those things that drew me to Anderson. And of course, secondly, just the Anderson network as a whole was just humongous. And it just felt like one of the places to be, especially when I came to a recruitment event and everyone was just so nice and so friendly and welcoming. And so I just felt at home from day one during the recruiting process. And that's why I really decided that Anderson, I wanted to stay in LA. I wanted to be able to continue to work as well as take classes. So Anderson and the FEMBO program just seemed pretty perfect. So then moving on to my actual journey in Anderson, this photo is from, I believe it was the first day of either organization behavior or leadership foundations. So that was our original learning group and building the Lego robot, which I'm sure you all remember well. And then this is a picture of our original Section 3 crew. And I did a little bit of what Dominique did. I wanted to focus on the fact that I really try to do a lot of work on women's business connection. And Darcy probably remembers that time we went to that cool women's council event, I think as ambassadors. But I just thought it was really interesting, especially at Anderson, that our class, I believe, had the highest women to men ratio. And I think the 2023s have actually beat us this year, which is even better. But I saw during Anderson that, you know, a lot of women were movers and shakers, and there was this sense of community with women leaders helping each other and supporting each other. So I really enjoyed that. During my second year, or in between the second and third year, I got to do two really amazing things. I got to do a summer internship at FX Networks, which was Fox, but that actually was the summer that 21st, I think it was 21st Century Fox is what they're called. Yeah. And they had just been acquired by Disney. So I got to intern in finance. And I thought that was a really interesting time because of that transition, they were going from one fiscal year to another. And I just thought it was one of those rare moments that you don't really get to see every year. So that would be a great opportunity to learn. So that was really nice. And then I did do towards the end of that summer a global immersion to Sweden and Finland. And actually, funny enough, because Darcy was doing her gap during that time, so we did get to meet up one night. I think it was in Stockholm. So that was cool that we got to see each other. But that was the year of traveling for a lot of our class. But this photo is at King Games. I'm a huge Candy Crush person. I love playing Candy Crush all the time. So I was very much geeked out and excited to be there. And then here towards the end, I got to go to a UCLA game with my dad. So that was really cool. Once again, what I loved about Anderson is that it's, you know, there is that social aspect, but it's a community. It's very pro-family. So it's one of those things that I think really drew me to coming to Anderson. And then at the bottom is another photo with the lovely Darcy at our Halloween. I believe this was the Halloween party of our last year. So this was maybe a couple months before COVID too. So one of the last parties probably that we got to have. And I did get the William Cockram Fellowship my last year as well, and that was a real honor to have. And I mean, he's such a great professor, and trying to be a good citizen. That was really an honor, and I'm so appreciative for that opportunity. And then, of course, the very last photo is the team I had for the business creation option. I actually did BCO instead of GAP. for my capstone project. And that was such a great experience because we built a product as software as a service. And even though we didn't continue on, it really helped me learn, I guess, all the tools I needed to know for my new job opportunity, which I can go ahead and transition to. So for our post Anderson journey, I had to include the card that we had during our virtual graduation service, just because we had a virtual graduation service, you know. And then also around that time, that's when I joined the Drive Time team and helped Dylan build out his vision from the podcast to the YouTube series. So I'm super appreciative of this past year and all the amazing interviews and stories that we got to tell and share with people. I also got to participate in a COVID wedding, and I was a bridesmaid. That was a very, very interesting experience, to say the least. But it was one of those things that, you know, we had all quarantined right before. We had all gotten tests to make sure that we were fine. And basically the bridal party kind of just stayed together almost in this little incubation house so that none of us got COVID and so that we could be around each other. And then of course I do have to show that Dolly did get to be the flower girl. It was the bride was is my best friend. So it's not that I guilted her into it. She actually did ask for Dolly to be the flower girl. So, and then also last but not least, you know, this experience of the stay-at-home order. It's funny how, like, when you're in the thick of it, you don't really see where the journey is going to take you. But then when you kind of look back, you're like, okay, this all makes sense. And this was leading up to it. So with Launchpad Central, this was software that we used in an entrepreneurship class. And this was actually in Professor Jennifer Walsky's class, which shout out to Professor Walsky if you guys get to, she does a social impact class and an entrepreneurship class. So I truly recommend getting to have her as a professor because she's fantastic. And she didn't pay me to say that. And she used this Launchpad software, and that's what we used for the idea that eventually became our BCO project. So as a TA, I would often teach or demo some of the Launchpad software to the class. And funny enough, they happened to be growing their group of folks in the end of January. And so I was able to actually get connected by Professor Walsky, and the rest is history. So now I'm the director of customer experience over there, and I'm looking forward to, it's another software as a service, and I'm looking forward to growing the brand and the awareness of the product. And I think it's exciting move to technology. I think technology is just a good place to be in right now, and I'm excited to see where it takes me. So that's pretty much it for me. I'm going to stop sharing.
I was going to ask, how was it having a COVID graduation? I feel for you, class of 2020.
It was pretty much how we expected it. I think is a good way to say that. And, you know, I think the school really did try to make the best out of a really bad, impossible situation. And what's nice is that, you know, they really did, I think, assure us that, you know, eventually you will have your graduation. We just don't know when. And I guess hopefully now that with the vaccine and the fact that pretty much everyone should be able to get one by May 1st, hopefully, you know, we'll start hearing some rumblings in the summertime of when we would be able to have a ceremony to make up for it. But I think it hurt less because we knew that, you know, it wasn't a substitute for it. It was a just for now. But it still, you know, it was they did the best they could do, but it was still a disappointment that we didn't get to celebrate together. And you know, and
yeah, it was interesting because as you said, Sam, they did a fantastic job in trying to recreate it as much as possible. But yeah, it was really strange watching it on TV. I mean, we had like a little pre-celebration beforehand, like a group of 6 of us. And, you know, we all cheersed and everything like that. And we watched it together. And then after that, it's like, okay, cool. Well, see you guys later. Like, it was the weirdest thing. Yeah. I mean, like, I was in bed by like 8 o'clock that night. Like, it was the weirdest thing. But anyway, yeah, we'll have one. We'll have one again.
Yeah. But I mean, it is an interesting experience. And it's the same thing, like, you know, as I told my friend who is getting married, I was like, you gotta I know you don't want to take a picture with the mask, but you gotta do it. You gotta do it because this is like
once in a lifetime, hopefully.
But not even once in a multiple lifetime, right? Like, this doesn't happen, but once every 100 years, hopefully even longer than that.
Right.
But yeah, the great grandkids might be like, what is this? Why were they wearing a mask? And then you could be like, well, let me tell you, child. You know, so that was my best grandma voice. I don't know. This is why I moved to technology. But yeah, I think it is one of those, when we look back on it, we're going to be like, okay, well, that was a special moment. And maybe it wasn't ideal, but not everyone can say they had a virtual graduation.
That's true.
And I still feel like we're lucky in that we still had our beginning years where we really were able to cement our friendships and, you know, all of those things before the graduation. So in a way, when we come back, it'll be more of like a reunion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like they will make it a big hurrah like they've done with, like, you know, the Gap Party, Palooza. I figure it'll be on that kind of level. Hopefully I'm not setting anyone's expectations too high, but I think they're going to make up for it.
As we kind of transition into more of our sharing success and Women's History Month discussion, I'm going to ask Kathi to kick us off. Our first topic is going to be around negotiating tips and other stories. So, you know, learning how we can close that pay gap. Kathi?
Yeah, so that was like in the spirit of Anderson and me doing and learning about areas that were completely, I was completely unaware of. I went to, when you're in core, so you start Anderson and you're basically in core for a year, which means that you do not take electives yet. And so they have a structured set of what you're going to take with your section. But they did also have all these seminars at lunch or, you know, between your classes or after class, et cetera. So I would try to go to as many of them as I could because it's a little bit like an elective, right? When I couldn't take one yet. And so there was one on negotiating for women that Professor Corinne Bendersky was giving. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, like negotiating. I'd worked, when I was in consulting, my former boss was an attorney in her previous life. And so she was a great negotiator. So I was always watching her. I was really fascinated by it. But then there was this like add-on of negotiating for women. And I'm like, what's that qualifier? Like, how's that different? So I go to this seminar and Professor Bendersky is talking about how, you know, because of the systemic issues in our society, about how we perceive women and how we expect them to act. The way that they negotiate, if they do at all, has to be different. And she was saying that most women don't negotiate. When they get a job offer, they don't counter it. And I was shocked. Like, I didn't realize I was one of those people. I didn't realize I was supposed to counter it. I didn't know how to counter. It felt terrible to counter. And she was talking about like how women have to present the counter, right? Like how, like smiling, right? You even saw like our vice president, Kamala Harris, doing that in the debates when she would say, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking, right? And she would smile when she says it. So like that was basically what Professor Bendersky was saying, was when you ask for something, you unfortunately have this onus on you where you have to present it in a certain way. But and she taught me that women didn't share their salaries with each other the way men do, so they could actually benchmark whether they were being paid enough. That women needed to do that. I took all this, I thought, I can do it. I mean, it was so practical. I'm like, I can do this. So I started the job I got at Toyota. I put that in practice. I gave a number that I was much, much higher than I currently had made. It was a number I was afraid to say. And it was a number that when I said it, I thought at the time they were going to say to me, "Are you kidding?" Like that was what I thought they were going to say. And I gave the number and I paused and I was like, I feel so uncomfortable. And the response was like, I was like crawling out of my skin, and I'm in an interview. So I'm like trying not to look like I'm crawling out of my skin. And the interviewer said, "Oh, I think I can do that." And I'm like, I gave a 6-figure number that you agreed to. Like, I didn't expect you to agree. I thought you'd like talk me down another whatever amount of money, and it taught me, it was like, this is just being brave, right? And so it made me feel like when Professor Bendersky said, women don't share this information and women don't want to talk about money. And I'm like, I was like, I'm not a millionaire, and I don't, not like some massive negotiator or anything, but I thought, if I can learn this, I can pass the message on. So when women are interviewing now, whether they're at my level, above or junior, like I always offer to talk them through their negotiation to the best I can. I share anything in the past, including real numbers. I don't, talk around the numbers. And I like, it feels so good to like talk with other women and to be like, they wanted a certain number. It's like, no, ask for more. And then they get it. And you're like, look at you, Mm-hmm. So like that's what I want for all of us. Like, that's what I want for all women. I want women to be super rich. So yeah, that was, I don't know, do you guys have like those kinds of experiences where you're negotiating or you haven't been comfortable negotiating? Kind of how's that affected you?
Well, Kathi, like I have obviously a very recent story. We had a conversation, a very long conversation about this just last night. I had gotten an offer and reached out to her, and don't let her fool you, she is a master negotiator. We talked about really just helping find and understanding my value and not being afraid to ask for that number, knowing at this point this is what I'm worth, and not being willing to deviate from that. And so it's definitely a challenge. And we talked about how that I'm going to have to sit with that uncomfortableness when I say that.
It is uncomfortable. It is.
But it's been so helpful to be able to lean on, people like Kathi who have been there and done that and been very, very successful at it. So kudos and thank you to Kathi.
It's my pleasure.
I think that's you both bring up a great point, is that women need to talk to other women about this, but they need to go to women that they trust and that they know are going to give them the advice they both maybe they want to hear and don't want to hear. Right. But just going to somebody that you trust and talking and going to, I would say, a handful of folks to get different points of view, because you never know, you can just pick and choose from everybody's advice and formulate your own. But yeah, I think being brave is a big part of it. So be brave, ladies. You can do it.
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Kathi, I have a question though. So how do you recommend kind of broaching the subject, because it is such a sensitive topic, and in many organizations it's taboo to talk about salary. So that's like my first question. And then second, how do you incorporate men's perspectives as well? Because then you can truly understand, is there basically, obviously we should be asking for, what our male colleagues are, making, but, how do you incorporate their perspective as well? So those two questions.
For me, I'd say like two things. Probably they both are about trust. So if you're going to talk within your organization about your salary or a range of your salary, and you're trying to get that, you definitely need to feel really close to you don't want it to become office gossip, right? So for me, I tend to be outside of my organization. Like that is how I handle those conversations. I don't like to have them within the organization. And the same answer for men, right? Like, so I definitely would when you get an offer for something, which is the easiest way of doing it is when you get an offer versus getting a raise, right? So that's sort of a different scenario that we could talk about. But when you get an offer, you for sure want to run it by, like Sam said, a variety of people you trust, and you want to be like, what do you think of this offer? Where does it sit for you? And not online, not Glassdoor and not PayScale, but real people, But what else is the offer missing? Like, is the bonus percentage, is that normal for this level of job? What roughly was your bonus percentage? Did you ask for something else in addition, right? Like, did you say, I have a professional organization that I belong to, and I'd like you to pay for that, right? Like, there were other ways, if you were a woman I knew suggested, she did this in her deal, and I hadn't ever considered this. This is where you get these ideas, right? Is in these conversations. You understand how other people expanded their deal in creative ways that you didn't think of. So this other woman said she got an executive role, and they didn't want to give her something. They didn't want to give her like extra money or something. She said, okay, I would like a press release in the entertainment trade. So I want you to run an article about me in Variety. And they said, okay, we'll do that, right? That's something I'd never considered that she brought up. So I do think with men, when you're doing this benchmarking, you do want to benchmark with women. You obviously do want to benchmark with men too, because of, obviously the pay gap differences. Right. But I've even, to be honest, like when I've done an offer and I'm negotiating with like someone from HR, there was a woman I negotiated with, and I did play the woman card on it. I said, listen, as a woman, can you tell me that is my offer for other people coming in at this level, this title level when they started, including men, like lower, the same, or higher on average? And that was the question I asked. And I don't know if I was going to get a real answer, but I'm going to try. And she like cut me off. She goes, it's substantially higher. I'm like, I won,
I'm surprised she told you.
Yeah, I can't believe she told you.
And I could tell she was a little irritated. So I believed that it was true. But yeah, I do think, Dominique, your point about asking men and men you trust is or even asking women if they want to ask other people for you, if you don't want to ask someone directly, the sort of like asking for a friend thing, but really asking for a friend, like, yeah, that I think would be the way I would go.
Thank you.
I have another question for the team, just to get your general thoughts. So you do your research, you have your idea of what you'd like your number to be. Let's say the company comes in and they exceed that. Do you then ask for a percentage above it just on general principle? Or do you sort of, think this is, better than I thought, let me take it and go? And I asked for two reasons. The rationale for the former is I've heard of, particularly men in general, sometimes just asking for a little on top. What's the harm, right? And so I was curious, anything you guys can speak to on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same question actually, because that recently happened to me as well, where the offer was substantially higher than I was even expecting. And so again, do you just ask out of principle? And I did have one, actually the person who had my role before, he was kind of advising me, and he told me, he said, he actually told me, he was very frank. He says, you have a really good offer. He says, but they're expecting you to negotiate. And he's like, you're leaving money on the table if you do not. And so, yeah, to me, that means, whatever they say, whatever they offer you, always just don't even think about it. Just always negotiate. But still, it's so uncomfortable. And, again, if you're coming from the mindset, oh my gosh, maybe for me, I felt like I'm being greedy if I ask for more, because this is more than what I was expecting. But, to your point, Kathi, just do it. Just do it. And, like Ramine said, just be comfortable with the uncomfortable, and know that you're doing your future self a favor, because you're increasing your baseline next time, not only for promotions within the organization, but also for future endeavors at other companies as well.
That brings up sorry, Sam.
I was just gonna echo. There is a psychology aspect to it. Having taken a negotiations class, they do say that when you negotiate, when the employee negotiates, the employee is obviously going to feel more satisfied, but the employer is actually going to respect you more or value you more. So I think it's maybe not mutually beneficial, but it's beneficial for multiple reasons. But go ahead, Kathi.
Oh, I was going to say, Dominique, your colleague or your predecessor who said, it's that phrase, yes, it's a good offer, right? It's the second phrase. You are leaving money on the table. You are leaving money on the table, and someone else in your role would ask for a little bit more and might get it. So why not you? There was something that Professor Bendersky said that I put into practice when I negotiated my Fox job, and I didn't know this at the time. And I'm shocked at how not a lot of people know this specific thing. So the salary that you come in on is often the salary that everything is built off of forever while you're at that company. So let's say you come in at $100,000, right? Your bonus will be paid on $100,000. When you are promoted, it is not necessarily a new bracket of salary. It is a percentage on your old salary. So they'll take your $100,000. They don't go, oh, you're now promoted, you now make $150,000. They go, no, we're going to give you a 12% raise and call it a promotion. So that very first number that you come in at that company at, you want to be aggressive, because you're going to live with the effect of that number for a long time. And at Fox, I had a colleague, we came in roughly at the same time. He's a male colleague. I negotiated, he did not. We had different bonuses because I had a different salary, even though technically we had the same job. When we got promoted, we got the same percentage promotion bonus, but I made more money because I came in higher in the very beginning. So it's really, you know, this sort of ask for a little bit more even when you get a good deal is very important.
But I would say too, it's also easier to negotiate when you're coming in than when you're already in an organization as well.
That's so true.
So shifting topics here, another thing that we wanted to touch on today was how to be more, you know, assertive in the workplace as a woman. And so with that, Ramine, I know you shared a story when we were kind of preparing for this. So I'd love for you to kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to share this story, and maybe it can serve as a case study. This was early on in my career, in my early 20s. I had the opportunity to be a part of a leadership team at a facility. I was working as environment, health, and safety manager, and I, along with a few other coworkers, were part of the plant leadership team. You had the operations manager, you had the maintenance manager, the plant manager, quality manager, and here I am representing environment, health, and safety. And so we had, I believe, quarterly or monthly touch base meetings with the plant leadership team. We're going around discussing, I don't know, plant metrics or something. We're around the table in the operations manager's office. And so we're having a dialogue. I'm discussing something. And one of my colleagues, he puts his hand up. We're all in a circle. He puts his hand up gently in my direction. And he says, "Look here, little girl." And when he said that, I'm shocked. I mean, I share with you guys, I blanked out. I don't know what he said after that. He could have called me the best person ever, but I blanked out after that. And I was shocked because this was a person that I had considered a work ally. He and I had talked about all kinds of things, work-related, non-work related, and I was shocked that I had this interaction with him in a public setting. And the second thing I thought was, I have to find a way to address this. I have to find a way. But before I could sort of figure out what I wanted to say, run sort of the strategies, game theory in my mind of how it's going to play, I just started talking, and we're all in the circle. He stops talking, and then I put my hand up the same way he did to me, and I said, "Look, your name. You can call me big girl or little woman, but don't call me little girl." And I'm sure there was an awkward silence, and somehow we got back to the topic of the meeting. But that experience it was jarring early on in my career. And then afterward, you know, he comes back, we're in the hallway, and he apologizes, and our relationship is reconciled. But thinking about that as I was sharing that with you guys and trying to decide, you know, is there value in sharing it or not? I realized that we as women or just people, individuals, we're all going to experience negative bias, and it could be overt or it could be covert. And while we can't control what other people do and how they respond to us, all we can control is our reaction to it. And it was just thinking about it now, it's interesting to kind of walk that thought exercise. And then, like I mentioned, open the dialogue with you guys. What were your thoughts of how I handled that situation? Would you do anything differently? And I think you guys, Dominique, I think you mentioned a similar interaction that you had too. And it was just really insightful to share that and to just hear the perspective of other people that may have had similar experiences.
Well, Ramine, first of all, I have to just applaud you on the professionalism that you had, and just the level of coolness that you responded, because I certainly don't think I would have responded in the same way. I still probably would have done it. I mean, well, not probably. I would have done it professionally, but it's certainly, you know, you did it in such a way that you enabled the conversation to continue to go, you know, continue flowing. And although it may have been a bit awkward, you know, like, you still were able to make a joke out of it, but get your point across. I'm not good at that. I wish I were witty, but I'm not. Yeah, I, as I shared with all of you, I would have probably like stopped the conversation right there and just said, wait, hold on. Let me just make sure I did hear that correctly and that you were talking to me. And then of course it would have made it even more awkward, but you know, I'm certainly going to get my point across that I'm not going to tolerate disrespect, because that was completely disrespectful. And, you know, I have a hard time believing that that would have happened to a man, you know, because then you can just imagine when you have, you know, when you have men, they're just going to fight back because that's something that they do, you know? Yeah. And not saying that that's bad. It's just, you know, that it's probably more acceptable for a man to respond back to and say, whoa, what, you know, so if they anticipate that, then they're probably going to think twice before saying something like that. And I think we as women have been conditioned to, certainly, at least in my upbringing, to be quiet, to, you know, to smile, to be pretty, and to not rock the boat. And yeah. So anyway, I seriously applaud your response there. I had a different situation where it was certainly less overt as yours, but I was in a meeting with about 20 individuals, and my manager was very cutting and really aggressive, and anything that I said, he would just undercut it and continually to ask me questions to kind of make me feel uncomfortable and like kind of prove, like basically to get me off balance and make me feel like anything that I was saying was not credible. And as I shared with all of you, it of course really irritated me, but instead of coming to him and talking to him that day, because I was so angry and I didn't want to say something that I would regret later. And then also too, a part of it is, I don't know about you all, but for me, anytime something like that happens, or, you know, something that bothers you, you think, oh, am I being a little sensitive? You know, was that me? Did I misinterpret that? So, you know, I didn't want to just say something to him right then and there. But then I had several people that were in the meeting come to me later and say, what the heck was that? And so, okay, good. I'm justified in that. Went home that day, thought about, okay, what is it that I want to say after, you know, I've calmed down a little bit. And then I did go to him the next day because not every conversation, not every situation requires something that, you know, you need to speak up like right then and there. Oftentimes you can handle it behind closed doors. So that's what I did. I did go to him the next day after I was calmed down, and I had a notepad of the notes that I wanted to make sure that I made. And I said, hey, you know, I appreciate working here, and you know, I value your mentorship and XYZ. Yesterday's meeting was very awkward for me, and I felt disrespected. And I don't know what caused that, why that happened, but it certainly wasn't just me that felt that way, but it was certainly directed towards me. And, you know, I just want to make sure that I call to your attention that that's completely not acceptable for me. And I'm letting you know that, number one, I saw it, others saw it, and I'm not going to sit here and like take it. And so, you know, he apologized. He said, you know, it wasn't my intention to make you feel uncomfortable. But then, so not every story has a happy ending. This one, I stayed there for, I think, another year afterward. And ever since that conversation, the relationship just downgraded from there, and it was extremely uncomfortable. He was consistently undercutting my credibility with my colleagues. At the end, you know, after a year, I knew it was time for me to go, and that was completely fine. And so I will say that, you know, when you step up for yourself, Sometimes it's going to be challenging no matter what. Some people are not going to take it well. It doesn't mean that you don't do it anyway, because it means that you probably need to stay there for as long as you need to stay there, and then you need to jet, right? It's not the environment for you. I do think that this person was new in their job, and so they were a new manager. They weren't used to somebody sticking up to them, or, you know, standing up for themselves to them. And I truly think it caught him off guard. And he obviously clearly doesn't like somebody challenging his authority. I sure hope that more people have challenged his authority by now, because you got to learn. But in any case, it's all, you know, that story, I shouldn't say it wasn't a happy ending, because I learned a lot while I was there. And then I moved, and that experience helped me to grow in my confidence that, like, no, look, yeah, yes, I'm junior in my role, or I'm still learning. It doesn't mean that I'm still not a valuable, I'm a person, number one. Number two, that I bring value to the table. And number three, I and everybody else deserves respect. Yeah. And if you cross that line, that is no go for me. And I'm going to stand up for myself. So that's kind of how I handled it. But again, just knowing that, you know, they can end up different ways, and you just gotta roll with it. But still doesn't mean that you should not stand up for yourself.
Well, let me ask the panel, like, how do you find that courage to stand up for yourself? You know, Dominique, you said we've been taught to be nice and quiet, you know, and hearing about both of your situations, I can honestly say, like, I would probably be the person who wouldn't react at all. I would just take it, you know, and wouldn't say anything in the moment. And so let me ask the rest of the panelists, how do you find that courage to speak up and use your voice?
For me, I'm hearing it. I'm getting it right now. Like, I wouldn't have reacted. I would have done what you did, Darcy. I would have probably taken it, or maybe made some reaction, but I wouldn't have had the presence of mind Ramine had, or the like courage that Dominique did, like the next day, where she, you know, confronted her boss. I would be really afraid of retaliation, and that fear would be bigger than my belief that I should be treated decently. And so actually, like, hearing your stories I can feel it in my brain. It begins to create this framework for me, where it's like, you wouldn't know what to do. You have two great examples right now of different ways that you could handle it. And both are, this is okay. Like, that's what it's telling my brain. It is okay to stand up for yourself at work. And I'm like, because it's challenging my belief system. And that's, for me, like, that's what I really need right now, is in order to grow.
Sam, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to add that one thing I like to do is, I guess, decompartmentalize the situation by saying, well, if someone had said that to a friend of mine, would I have let her just shrug it off? You know, and, you know, most of the time it's a no. And I'm like, okay, well, then I need to be my own advocate. And it's one of those things where, you know, you get the sweaty palms, or, you know, you start seeing red, and you feel like, you know, maybe you're gonna not damage the situation, but maybe you're going to come off not the way you want to come off, but at the same time, you have to stick up for yourself and you have to say something. So I think just practice, just do it every time. And hopefully eventually it'll start to feel normal, that you can start putting your hand up and say, excuse me, I'm trying to speak.
Excuse me, I'm speaking. Well, you know, for me though, and Sam, you bring up a really good point, is because something that we as women, and especially women of color, have to think about too, is how we come across, because we are oftentimes labeled as emotional when we're in our normal speaking voices, and we can be perceived as threatening in our normal speaking voices. And so actually, I was just talking to my mom about this just a couple of days ago. You really have to choose your language carefully. Well, first of all, you have to choose your battles wisely too, because not every single time somebody says something am I going to just be like, well, hold up. I'm not going to. And so to your point, Darcy, you know, there had been times before where I had felt like, what the heck was that? But I'm like, you know, I'm going to let it go. Yeah. That was the straw. And I'm like, I'm totally done with this. But in order to have that person hear you, it's really important, again, and it's not fair, but we as women have to think about, okay, what language can I use so that the other person is receiving the feedback that I'm giving, right? Because if you come off as, you know, I'm really angry and I have every single right to be, they just oftentimes will just shut down and don't hear a word you say. And then they're like, oh, I've got this crazy woman, you know, she started yelling at me. And you're like, no, actually, I was expressing myself. And so that's why for me, I don't have to do this every time, but in that certain instance, I absolutely had to, because I was seeing red. I was so angry. And like I said, Ramine, I would have been, if that happened to me, what he did, put his hand in my face, I would have lost it. I would have been professional, but I would have been like, hold up.
but I do have to ask.
But like writing notes is actually that way you can stick to not a script, but you can make sure that the things that you want, the points that you want to get across, you say them. So anyway, but I'll stop. Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, sorry, and not to interrupt you, but I do have to ask, Ramine, so did you mention, what was your relationship like afterwards with that individual?
That's a great question, Sam. Afterward, it went back to how it was, I'd say, on the surface. You know, we'd continue to talk about work, laugh and joke. I mean, because we were friends, we had a relationship before that. It's similar to if you have a pre-existing friendship and a friend says something that upsets you and then you kind of find a way to work yourself back. It was similar to that. But in the back of my mind, it just always made me very aware. And it's something that I think Dominique and Kathi had talked about, of that you can't quite let your guard down just because, you know, we're in a professional setting and it's just a pressure, right? And it made me look at that relationship with a little more caution. I think on the surface, you probably couldn't tell, but internally it was sort of that mental reminder that this is going to be something that I'm going to have to continuously deal with. So I've got to find a way to minimize it. And whether it's by speaking up so that people feel like they can't, you set that standard, or if it's finding some way internally to process it, you just, it definitely changed. And I do want to echo to your points. That was sort of the straw. I think many of us have instances where we wish we had said something, and I definitely did. And for me, a practice that I learned is once I say something, once I just speak up, it's easier to speak up. And I'll give an example, especially in the Zoom world. It's so easy to sort of be on Zoom and then not really say anything, you know, maybe kind of check your email and stuff. But I've made a conscious effort to at least speak up and ask a question. And I find it takes the pressure to maybe speak up again. And so my way of saying, find smaller examples to sort of exercise your power, find your space, even if it's just saying, hey, Darcy's in the room and I'm going to comment on what you said. It will make it easier to handle those bigger situations that maybe require more tact, more skill.
I think that's great advice.
Thank you both for sharing those stories. I think it's very, very helpful to hear for other women. So I think this is a kind of a good natural progression into, you know, how do you quiet the little naysaying voice in your head, and how do you combat imposter syndrome. You really shouldn't speak up, or you shouldn't ask for that, or you shouldn't do that. Do you, I'll just, open it up to the panel. Like, how do you deal with that?
I think that we'll always have that initial thought. The question is, what do you do next? Do you allow it to sort of cycle and devolve, or do you consciously try to fight it? And so a practice that I started is I've started keeping an I'm awesome folder. So anytime I get positive feedback from my boss, or when I was consulting, that's actually where it started, and I got positive feedback on a project I would work on, I would physically archive that feedback into an Outlook folder, into a file folder. And you could do the similar thing with your journal. And I found it very helpful for performance reviews or just general pick-me-ups during the day, where I have physical evidence that I am really good at what I'm doing. And it was great for negotiations too. I just want to share that. Coming in with the stack of, hey boss, look at all the great things my client said I did, give me that 10% raise. So that's something that it's a tool that I've used to help me stop the voice from progressing.
Well, thank you, Ramine, for sharing that story. And so now we're going to take, a little bit of a look ahead to what's on the horizon for women, and wanted to give the panel an opportunity to give any shout outs to any women mentors that they had, and it can be Anderson related or not. And to kick it off with, one of my mentors is actually on this panel, and that's Kathi. From the moment that I met her, she has just been so helpful. Anytime I need anything, I feel like she just bends over backward to make sure that I have the information I need. When I was interviewing for a job over at FX, she called me right away. What information can I provide you with? Here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to talk about. Or, even referring me into a role at MGM, and just really trying to support me in my, career goals. And most recently, as I mentioned last night already, trying to help me think about how to negotiate and advocate for myself. So thank you again, Kathi. I really appreciate all of your support and advice over the last few years.
I didn't realize you looked at me that way. I'm very, very flattered. It's my pleasure. So I love being friends with you. So I never knew you saw me like that. Thank you.
So Kathi, do you want to go ahead and go next then?
Sure. I have a friend named Kim. I met her while I was working at Fox, and we've stayed friends since. And Kim is a very direct person. I really respect her point of view, and she's very forthright. She's also a really good manager. Her people like her, but she has very good boundaries. She does a lot of things that I feel like I haven't learned very well yet, that I want to be good at. And she's comfortable with these things, right? She's comfortable being assertive. She's got like all sorts of stuff that I want to be good at. And I just feel like she gives me a lot of permission when I talk to her about something at work. Like I have a problem, speaking of, imposter syndrome, I have a problem overworking because I feel like I have to, in order to make sure I continually prove my value, because I'm not, basically the message I'm sending is like, or I'm concerned about is I'm not enough, right? And she will get mad at me about it. She'll be like, you need help. Like you need a direct report. You need to have your workload reduced. You can ask for these things. You need to go do that. And she will like bother me until I go do it, and I'm not good at these conversations. And I didn't even realize that I should have a reasonable workload. Like that's a thing, to expect. So I want to thank her because she's really empowered me with these ideas that are like, you deserve to have work-life balance. It is okay, and you deserve to ask for that. It is okay. So yeah, I'm grateful to her for that.
I actually have two female mentors who have been tremendously helpful at different times in my life. One is Elizabeth Schaub, and I used to work with her. And she's this wicked smart marketer, life sciences marketer, who actually inspired me to go get my MBA. And she got her MBA, and actually that's when I truly saw the value of getting an MBA, was through her. And she was just phenomenal in identifying your strengths and your weaknesses, and really teaching you ways to build on your strengths, and just so many other things. This was, I met her when I was still pretty fresh out of academia, and it was my first industry job, and yeah, forever grateful for her. And then Kathi Gann is my, one of my first managers that I had when I moved into the pharmaceuticals industry. And she has been incredibly supportive and just being a soundboard for, and I can't, it's funny because sometimes I'll just call her just to chat, and then we'll start talking about random things. And like I end up getting off the call thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't know I needed to talk about that. And like, she provides so much advice. So definitely those two people, Kathi and Elizabeth. But I will say one other thing is, I also, obviously we're talking about Women's History Month and how important it is to have women mentors. It's also just as important to have male mentors as well. And I have a few male mentors as well. So I just encourage us ladies to also seek those relationships as well, because again, they provide another perspective. And having that diversity of mentors, that way you don't burn out one person, I think is important. So anyway, I'll stop there. And I'll popcorn it to Ramine.
Yes. So my it was difficult. I think that I have several mentors that come in and out of my life during different phases. I think the most consistent and probably the most personal, who I can talk to on a range of issues, is my mom, Lois Thornton. And I know it may seem a little obvious, right? But one of the things that I really respect about my mom is she's very much like me, in the sense of I tend to be probably a little more reserved at times, but very strong. And I think she's mastered that art of finding her way to be authentic in her space and communicating her point. And I always pick her brain, and has a great way of sort of connecting and talking to me and expressing contrary opinions, because sometimes I may not be open to it, but when it comes from my mom, I always listen. And so my mom is definitely probably the one that's progressed with me through obviously the duration of my life.
So you stole my answer. I was gonna say my mom too, but yeah, my mom is absolutely amazing woman. And funny enough, I feel like when it comes to standing up for yourself, she is the example I try to be, because she's one of those people that when she walks in a room, everybody knows it. She's loud and proud. And I mean, I'm from Texas, so I guess it comes with the territory, right? But she is not afraid to say what's on her mind. And I admire that so much. And especially if she thinks, I mean, I don't know if you guys think follow astrology, but she's a Libra. So if she sees something that, you know, she doesn't think is right, she's going to tell you about it. And I just wish I could, I mean, I try to step up and be like her sometimes. But I've always admired that. And I feel like I'm a little bit more reserved. So it's nice to, you know, call her, you know, she's my best friend. So calling her, you know, at least once a week and just saying, this is what's going on. And then she could say, well, you need to fight for it. You need to do this. You need to do that. So I really appreciate her being a positive influence in my life. And then of course, as Dominique mentioned, having men mentors as well. I could say like my dad too has always, really, he's really supported me. I've never felt less than, because I'm a girl. I think, he's always told me you can do anything you want to do. So, just having a positive mentor in that, where, a man who really, is a good influence and a good, doesn't see your worth based on gender, but because of who you are as a person. And then of course got to do a shout out to my mentor, Professor Walski at Anderson. And she's just been such an amazing, I've known her since my entrepreneurship class in 2018, and she's been an absolutely wonderful individual, and I've gone to her for advice. She's a great person. So get to know her if you can. But and then also last but not least, I do want to say that I want to do a shout out to Dylan, because as you mentioned, we have to have really good men allies in this world. And I think Dylan is a great example of of an individual who, he I guess he's on the hot seat sometimes, and being a white man, and the fact that he doesn't allow himself to stay away from potentially uncomfortable situations, but he's not afraid to have those conversations. And he knows the importance of diversity and having women's voices heard. So just wanted to thank you so much for allowing us to hijack drive time.
And I have to second that.
Yeah.
Dylan has been extremely supportive.
Really?
And in fact, Dylan, my femba journey starts with Dylan, and calling me and out of the blue, and I'm like, who's this 310 number? What? Yeah. So it starts and it ends with Dylan, and again, I just want to echo that, what you said, Sam, about Dylan's support, and always first and foremost being for the students, and also too just your lifelong learning mindset of and the humility that you always have in learning and trying to get to know other people's and share other people's stories and using your capabilities there. So thank you.
As we kind of wrap up all of our conversations, kind of a last question for the panel is, if you could speak to your 12-year-old self, what would you say to her, thinking about the future for women? And Samantha, I know you wanted to kind of kick us off here. So what are your thoughts?
Sure. So I guess this is the time travel part where we're going back in time and talking to our 12-year-old self. But goodness, that's such a loaded question. And I think that ultimately, because there'd be so much that I want to tell her. I think when it comes down to it, the most important thing I would want to tell her is that to believe in yourself. Your ideas, your feelings are valid, and there will be people along the way who will say you can't do it, and don't listen to those people, because it's all going to end up working out. You're going to have a wonderful life. You're going to meet some amazing people, and you will eventually see women in the world that you want to be, and you'll see more of them as you get older. And it's slow paced, but we're getting there. And just to always keep trying, and if it gets hard, work things out then and there, but ultimately don't give up. And that's pretty much it, I guess. Let's see. Ooh, popcorn time. Let's do Ramine.
So last time I stole what you said, so you stole what I said this time. It's cosmic. That and sort of piggybacking off what Dylan had mentioned, I would tell my 12-year-old self to have to listen to that inner voice and learn to become very attuned and close to it. I know for me, when I was in that age, I was so focused on what other people were doing, what were my friends doing, and also worried about sort of executing on my to-do list, right? Like I felt like I didn't have much wiggle room. Otherwise I'd end up in a situation I didn't want to be in, or I'd blow a shot, just playing stuff very close and very tight. And I found that as I've become an adult, that life is full of all of this gray and variation, and that being attuned with your inner voice, your intuition, can be just as important for decision making as what the data and the facts tell you. So start young and build that strength and connection and confidence in that inner voice. And let's see, popcorn. Oh, I'll switch up for classes. Let's do Darcy.
Kind of going off of what both of you have said, I would tell my 12-year-old self to not be too hard on yourself. Whether it's, giving a presentation and remembering that one time you messed up or you didn't say the right thing, or, even in something like sports, like you were talking about missing a shot, or, whatever is, just kind of taking those moments and learning from them and not really being too hard on yourself about those things. So with that, I will popcorn over to Dominique.
I thought you were going to say Kathi. I was going to say we go zigzag. But I would say to myself, you don't have to be perfect. And in fact, no one is. But rather than strive for perfection, strive for progress. And, that's actually something that I have kind of lived my life for, kind of doing, but oh my gosh, beating myself up along the way, because like you said, it's like, oh man, I missed that shot, or I really blew that presentation, or, or I didn't come off as strong as I thought I wanted to. And at the end of the day, like nobody does. And so just, accepting yourself for where you are and who you are, to Ramine's point, and just trying to make those incremental steps in the right direction every single day. So, yeah. So, Kathi, you.
It seems like we all are so aligned, which is like a whole different subject, right, of how women grow up and what they think, right? But I would tell my 12-year-old self, I would say, in that idea of incremental growing, I'd say you grew up with a fixed mindset. You thought people were good at things or they weren't. You thought that you have to be good right away, which is a horrible thing, right? Because then you never want to try things, or you try things and give up really fast. But you will learn much later on that practice is okay and normal. And being bad at something in the beginning does not mean you will be bad at it forever. It's a temporary thing. And if you can struggle through it a little bit, if there's a good payoff. But there's no need to be ashamed because you're a beginner. So just, luckily you're a really determined person. So if you just learned this lesson earlier, it would be helpful to you. That you would, you'd probably still be playing tennis today, right? Like you'd still be doing things that you tried, that you gave up on because you felt bad about yourself, that you weren't good right away. And you know what? Maybe you would have been good in a little bit and not right away.
I think that's
Definitely seeing a theme. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Ramine.
Oh, that was it. I just say it's a theme.
It's a theme.
Journal, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I was just going to say, I think that's a perfect note to end on. And again, I just want to thank the rest of the panelists so much for spending their time today to have these very important conversations, not only for the future of Pemba and Anderson, but the women as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for sharing your insights and your experiences. Again, all similar themes. Like, it's just so comforting to know that we all are in this together, and you are not alone in how you're feeling. And so I appreciate, all of your time. Thank you.
And I third it, fourth it, fifth it. Thank you guys so much. I didn't realize how much I would get from just talking with you guys. And so often we're all in our own bubbles. We don't realize just the amazing community we've built. And so being alongside you ladies for this couple hours has been a pleasure and an honor. And I just feel so privileged. Thank you.
Same. I feel like we're the way I felt when I met my class, where I was like so inspired because every person had this great point of view and was really smart and had an interesting background. And this is just even better because it's all women. So you realize like how much we live through these similar experiences, but may not share them that often. And then when you do, you don't feel as isolated. I feel like we kind of get used to living in this isolated way. And even when you have girlfriends and stuff, that's not the same thing. But now we're like talking about all this stuff, you realize like we're all living very similar. We have similar shared experiences. So you feel less alone.
Well, and I just want to say that it's been absolutely amazing to have you all on the panel. So thank you so much for being willing to be here, and hope that these stories and these experiences will encourage other all admits, but especially women admits to come to Anderson and join our community. As you mentioned, it's like we're all connected, so you'll fit right in.